to start off by thanking Joyce Byers for letting us use her living room. As you can see here, we've done something a little different today with the set. Thank you, my friends, for joining us today. I'd like to introduce you to the team from Stranger Things. To my immediate left, editor Kevin Ross, Kevin's assistant Kat Naranjo. You again, sir? You are?
Everyone calls me Dan, but it's actually Dean.
It's actually Dean.
Yeah.
Dean Zimmerman, the co-editor of Stranger Things, and Dean's assistant Nat Fuller. Nat, Dean, Kat. It's very poetic. Kevin, thank you for being here today. I got a screen full of questions. People from all over the world want to talk about this show. Before we get into all the questions and the workflow stuff and your background, I just want to talk about the show itself and the vibe of the show. And to me, this is a show that very easily, in the wrong hands, could have gone south. When it first came out, very quietly, like it just sort of snuck up on everybody. This is the ultimate, friend of a friend show where everyone's like, "Have you seen Stranger Things yet?" That's before you know it, 5 different people in a day have said, "Have you seen Stranger Things yet?" Until eventually you must give in and watch Stranger Things, and you're glad you did. But a lot was made of it being a period piece and being an homage, and actual directors being named, Spielberg and Stephen King and John Carpenter. And like I said, in lesser capable hands, it really could have been something that was kind of derivative or kind of cheesy, and instead it just was so note perfect on the era and on paying tribute to those styles of storytelling. I just want to know what the kind of discussions you had about the show and creating that vibe going into the project.
I mean, for us, it was really just we would get the scripts, we read them, and it was just that relatable, nostalgic feeling of going back into the 80s, back to our childhood, of seeing all those incredible films that it references and pays homage to in the series. So the discussions really weren't so much about that. It was really kind of, how do we take this series? And we kind of broke it down, me and Kevin both coming from a film background. Let's make this an 8-hour movie. Let's take all 8 episodes that were going to be an hour long each, and let's tell an 8-hour story and then break it up by, episodes, or what we'd call them reels. And so that's what we did. And as long as we were true to making the characters' arcs work and the storyline work and tell the great story narratively, that's, I think, ultimately what we really were focusing on, more than we're part of something so special that we didn't even know at the time. But we did know that it was such a great, relatable feeling, and it brought you back to your childhood. For me, at least for me anyway, I was like, yeah, this is awesome. I'm so happy to be a part of it. But a lot of that is 100% credit to the Duffer Brothers. They are maestros and brilliant, and they really are the guys that really kept everything together and made an incredible series.
So for those of us that are a little older, we're kids in the 80s, do you find that that's the demographic that really just is? I mean, I think the great thing about the show is everybody, it resonates with everybody, but that's a demographic where it's like, oh my God, that's what it was like when I was, minus the Demogorgon, that's pretty much what it was like when I was a kid.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, I grew up in this time, and so I was fed these movies growing up that just, this hit that whole feeling of nostalgia for me as an editor. But the Duffers, I mean, they weren't even alive at that when this was set. However, they nailed it so well with the dailies. And we never approached it saying, we're going to try to do homages to the 80 movies. That's the material we were giving, and it just became an organic type of result, because we just wanted to cut the scenes to feel that way. And I was really pleased with all the material we had to work with and what our end result was.
So before we get into more of the nuts and bolts of making the show, still sticking with the theme of being a phenomenon, how quickly did you realize, or how soon did it dawn on you that we have something here, that this is starting to take over?
Well, it's funny because I was driving into work one day, and I was listening to like Sirius XM Hits 1, and Katy Perry was on, and she's like, "Oh my God, have you seen this show Stranger Things?" and blah blah. And they started talking about it, and I'm like, "Oh my God! Like, if we can hit someone like her who has an enormous fan base, I think we've made it, or at least it's something much bigger than what I was ever anticipating or could ever dream be possible." And that's when I knew, I was like, oh my God, if Katy Perry's endorsing this as big as she is, yeah, that was pretty cool for me. I was like, that we got it.
So as usual, we have a lot of people, online and ask questions that are looking at getting into the business or just starting. They're at the very beginning of their journey, and I think they're probably focused on Kat and Nat and how you guys, they're probably thinking, working on Stranger Things. That's what I want to do. Just a little bit, Kat and then Nat. If you want to talk about how you got started and how you got on this project, or starting working with your editor of choice here.
I started with Kevin. Oh, I met him on this other show called *Halt and Catch Fire*, and I was working with a different editor at the time. And he just called me up and said, "Hey, do you want to come with me to do this show called Stranger Things?" And I was like, he told me what it was about, and I was like, yes, yes, please. Winona Ryder, the '80s, yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I've heard of that. Yeah.
And I've been with Kevin for the past year now. Yeah. We just had our work anniversary.
Oh, that's right. I didn't get you anything. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it's been a blessing. I mean, it's been great, and I was really excited because also there was the fact that we were going on location, and we were in Atlanta for the first couple of months on this show, which doesn't normally happen on television. So that was an exciting change of pace to get to go and enjoy that, and so it's been working out really well with Kat.
Do you have as romantic a story, Nat?
Not as quite, but
Ours got romantic
yeah,
when we got to Atlanta. But before that,
Atlanta is for lovers.
Yeah, it is.
yeah, that's where it really blossomed. For
It
us.
did, it did.
You did have quite the honeymoon pad.
We had the honeymoon pad for sure.
But yeah, to answer the question, I got my start, just right out of college, got into post-production up in San Francisco, and I think the secret is really just kind of putting your nose to the grindstone and just taking the most out of every opportunity. I started as a PA up to assistant editor, moved down to LA, got my break here, and then it kind of leads one person to the next. So you'll always have kind of like the networking is really important. I met Dean through Last Witch Hunter, so that was another, it was a movie that we were working on, and that was wrapping up, and he's like, "Hey man, you want to come with me to work on Stranger Things?" Oh yeah. So, I like to think just putting your nose to the grindstone, doing the best job you can, and taking advantage of the opportunities.
Yeah, and that's what we look for, honestly. Like, as editors, or at least I personally, I'm always looking for young talent. I'm looking for someone who's just going to, give it their all, who's passionate about their trade, who's serious about their trade, because it's a very intense and important job. Not a lot of people know what we do, and so the fact that they don't know speaks volume as to what we do. And I don't take that lightly. I don't take that with a grain of salt. So I really look for people that are going to compliment me, that are going to help me be the best editor that I can be and produce the best product I can. And that was awesome. I mean, he really showed his stripes on Witch Hunter. It was that was a very challenging movie, and we had a lot of intense days. And he hung in there and was there. When we were working till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and it shows a lot. And that kind of drive and that kind of ambition is invaluable for me anyway. And it's something that I gravitate towards.
All right, so all you film school students in Montreal watching, I hope you took notes on that. That was for you. See, we are paying attention. A lot's been made about the music of the show and how that is evocative of the 80s and how it creates that 80s vibe. Jim wants to know how the music influenced your editing, if it actually did play a part in the editing style of the show.
Well, I'm not sure if Jim means the score or the source cues. As far as the score, the music itself doesn't really influence the cutting pattern, I don't believe, because I usually add the music at the end. I don't rely on the music to cut my scenes. So I'll have the scene cut, and then I will lay the score in afterwards. And on this, it was this techno kind of music, electronica music that you would get from Tangerine Dream or John Carpenter type of feel. And we had a huge bin of alts and various cues from Survive, and they were a new band out of Texas that we had never heard of before. And the Duffers had had asked them to send stuff, and they sent, how many hours of material did they send?
Yeah, it was a lot. I mean, I think they sent us
Hours
like
and hours.
121 cues, and I would say like the smallest cue was maybe a couple minutes long, and the longest being like a 40-minute cue. And it's just kind of like, just, so it's very much this rhythmic, sustained stuff, some faster pace, some slower pace. And what we would do is we would take or group like 4 or 5 of the cues together and kind of, not necessarily score the film, but, it wasn't a traditional score, as they say. We would build what music we thought was appropriate for the scene that we were cutting.
And they were basically pads that then we would try to add on top of each other to build that dramatic moment. Now, as far as the songs themselves, a lot of that time that really influenced what the overall cutting pattern would be at the end, because you're trying to hit down beats or try to get off the beat. And those cues, they did influence, I thought, my cutting style a lot in sort of montage areas.
Yeah, I mean, that's when you have, depending on the source music, or I should say, actual music cue or songs. If you're doing a montage or something, that would absolutely influence the cut, because, rhythmically and tonally, you'd want to work towards that piece of music. Yeah.
So a lot of questions about the process in general, and I think collaboration is the key theme here. We have two editing teams working in tandem. We have identical twin brothers that are the visionaries behind the show. Let's start with how the work is divided up. There's a question from Karen. What is a typical day like? And maybe there isn't a typical day, but if you could just sort of talk about how the workload is balanced between the two teams and what a day is like.
Well, if I may,
go ahead.
this was a unique situation for me coming from television. I have mostly a television background editing, and Dean has mostly a feature background. And on the case of television, normally you would do production by episode. So they would shoot episode 1, episode 2, and I would get dailies for episode, or Dean would have episode 1, let's say, and I would have episode 2. In this case, they cross-boarded every 2 episodes. So every day, except by looking at the call sheets, we never knew how much material we were going to get. Some days it might be heavy for episode 1.
Yeah, crossboarding means they would shoot 2 episodes at the same time.
And use the same directors, and that way they could stay at one location over the time for 2 different episodes instead of have to go back for the second episode. And so some days our material might be light. I might have just 30 minutes of material. Dean may have 2 hours. It might flip the other day. And some days it may be just episode 2 versus episode 1. But when the material did come in, then that was when Kat took over and Nat. And you guys want to say what you did with the material when it showed up from set?
Yeah, we just, we imported, we got from the dailies team, we got our Avid media, brought in the bins, set them up the way we like, our editors like. I know Kat was doing some scripting. I luckily, or
Yeah,
depending on, it's not really my favorite thing to do, but we work a different way. But there was also, it was interesting because Kat and I, we kind of had to work out a system. There was some shared stuff, like there were some maybe establishing shots or the survive music and the VFX, or things that we needed to share, which was really great because we found the favorite bin feature in Avid, which was great because we could all link to those favorite bins and be like, okay, all of the establishing shots live.
So were
in
you
this
on you were on shared storage? You were connected together already, and then you had the favorite bin to. Okay. I get
Yeah,
you.
and that way,
Well, because we broke each episode, so each project was its own episode. So that's why we had to have this favorites bin, which I don't know if that was new in the new version that we were using. We were using 8.4.3, which was the newest, was the best version or the latest version of Avid at the time, which was great. And so that favorites bin was invaluable for us because we were able to house all prior episodes, sound effects, music, things that we would use all the time, and not have to exit out of the project, go into the next one. So it really it was like that seamless,
Because we broke each episode up by project, and Kevin likes things the way he likes them, so I have to organize it that way. And Dean likes things the way he likes them, and Nat organizes it for Dean. But a way that we could talk to each other was the favorites bin.
yeah, it was
It's
great.
hey,
'Cause
this
we
is
didn't have to
Yeah.
be like, hey, let me give you this bin, and run that risk of maybe not updating it or wiping out some old stuff. It was like, that's where the bin lives. That's where we go to get our stuff. and that was pretty cool.
And
We
right
liked that.
now we're on another show, Kat and I, and we're on version 7, so we don't have the favorite spin available. But just to be clear, we didn't have to sync our own dailies. I mean, they went to a telecine house, and the material you received were already DNX files,
Yes,
correct?
yes. Yeah.
So, crossboarding aside, Rachel, I think I lost you, Rachel. Oh, there you go, Rachel. Wants to know how long you had to cut an episode. Now, this might be something a little different where in television, traditional television, there may be more specific boundaries, but like Dean said, this is sort of like an 8-hour movie in a way. Was there a general guideline along, okay, you have this long to do an episode, or is it just when all 8 are done, all 8 are done?
Well, it's per episode, it was get it cut as quickly as possible because you still want to stay up to camera or as close to that as possible. However, we were on a 21-day shoot for every 2 episodes. And that's a nice shooting schedule, but this show was very ambitious, so you needed those extra days. In traditional television, it may be a 7 or 8-day shoot for an hour, and then you cut along the way as an editor, and then you have 4 days usually to do your editor's cut, if you're lucky, if the schedule's long enough to have that, and then 4 days for a director's cut, then it goes to producer. This we had more time, and it really allowed us some nice leeway, especially at the end when we were looking at the final product. We could go back and tweak earlier episodes. That wouldn't happen in traditional television.
Yeah, that
Network
was such a
television.
great Netflix model, and a tribute to Netflix for setting it up this way, where we release everything at once. We had the luxury and the ability to go back and go, yeah, you know what, the arc isn't, let's tweak this in these episodes to really enhance this later. So with that flexibility, allowed massive amounts of creativity. And I think that's one of the big successes to the series, was that ability to really just fine tune and get in there and really polish every corner and every nook and cranny. It was great. It was awesome. It's a great way to work.
It is.
So one thing I thought about when we were getting ready for this webinar was the concept of a pilot episode. And you get into a series, like all these are very popular now, whether it's Stranger Things, Game of Thrones, Walking Dead, and so on. But when you're doing a pilot episode, do you really have to spend a little extra time or a little more mental overhead in terms of setting the stage or like laying the groundwork for what this show is going to be? Do you find that you actually have to do, like when you have like a walk and talk and somebody's literally like expounding on, well, so the aliens have landed.
I think on a traditional TV series, yeah, you do. I think you need to spend that extra time in the pilot. I find that's the beauty with Netflix, is you can be a bit sparse in the pilot because you're going to have everything coming at you at the same time. So you'll have, like you said, you kind of watch it as an 8-hour movie, and you break it up. The viewer can break it up how they want to. They can binge all 8 episodes, or one a day or whatever. So I think the lag time in between episodes allows, and the ability to not have any lag time allows you the flexibility to, just be true to the story of the series instead of the story of the episode. And so I think in that case, I don't think we really were thinking too hardly about, we would need to set up all this stuff, because there were characters that we didn't set up till later, and I think it's just as long as it felt organic to us and real and true to our main goal, which was this 8-hour series, we didn't worry too much about the actual pilot, if you will.
And because we didn't really have a pilot per se, because we just went straight through. Now on more traditional shows, I have cut a lot of pilots where it's a more intense process on the pilot because you're trying to set that world. And so you may come up with a cutting style that will be adhered to afterwards while the show continues. Or I come onto a show that I've seen the pilot and I go, okay, I know they like to do interstitial kind of transitions, or maybe they won't do that. Maybe they'll like to do more of a play it all in singles, or you have to try to match the style of the pilot. So when you're cutting a pilot, when you're in a room for like 20 hours a day or whatever with the director and the producer, and you just work nonstop to set that tone at that time. So pilots are pretty intense that way.
So you mentioned the word transitions. Matt had a question about how you guys approach some of the transitions between scenes and what were some of the favorite transitions you pulled off.
That was a great question.
That
Matt.
is.
Good job,
Really,
Matt.
really, really good question. Because the Duffer Brothers were very keen on transitions and doing these kind of Edgar Wright-esque transitions. Doing big sound effects that would go, across cuts and across scenes. And I don't know, a couple favorites of mine are the sprinkler in episode 1, the hamburger patty in episode 1. There's so many of them that are, we really focused a lot on these transitions and worked a lot with our sound supervisor, Craig Hennigan, our sound designer, to really, make sure that they were absolutely exactly how the Duffers wanted them. We did pay a lot of attention to transitions. We definitely worked hard to get them perfect, but it was definitely a team effort to do it.
Was there a discussion up front about certain, you name-checked Edgar Wright. I mean, was there a discussion with the Duffers or Sean Levy about, okay, this is going to be our palette that we're using for the show in terms of, or did you guys just find it?
No, I would say I never had a discussion with them about how to approach it. They never referenced any other films. They've never said to us, okay, this is going to be a Goonies moment, or this was going to be an E.T. moment. And or a Witness moment in case of one of my episodes people like to refer to. It's like, I never thought of that as a Witness moment. I was cutting it because I had the material and it's what felt right to me. And it felt honest. And getting back to the transitions for 1 second, it's like a lot of those relied on sound. And they were always cool. The Duffers never said, hey, we want to do this with a hard sound cut. But it's just an instinct told us to do that, to transition to the next scene. And what was great was Kat is awesome with sound effects. She's amazing. I mean, besides other things, she's just the sound pro. And I could take my cut to Kat and say, okay, Kat, now listen, I need something that just rises and just hits hard on the cut to go to silence in the next one. And 15 minutes later, she'd come in and have built like 6 tracks of something that just really sold the transition. So a lot of those are her doing because she made them work with her sound.
So Kat, how did you get to be such an expert at sound?
I think maybe the way the Duffer Brothers became an expert. I mean, I watched a lot of movies. I was like, I want it to sound like this and like this, just kind of mixing stuff together.
Well, there was a question from Marissa about, do the editors get to sit in the sound mixing sessions?
Oh, yeah.
Well, there you go. The
Yeah.
answer is yes.
Yeah, the answer is yes.
I remember they also called them at the end. The Duffers got really into the hard cuts, and I think Brad, the sound supervisor, he called it toaster cuts, and it was like this.
Is this a video toaster reference, or?
Like where it's like you have this moment and then pop,
toast pops up? Okay.
like
Yeah.
the Eggo waffle.
Yeah, we had that Eggo waffle pop up.
Yeah, so they'd be like toaster cut.
And I thought it was, they're referring to that specific cut, but no, I guess it's something in the sound world
Yeah,
that people know about.
I never heard about it.
So
I
Nat,
never heard about it either.
as assistants, obviously you guys are sort of tied at the hip to your editors, but what other functions within, I'll call it the filmmaking process for now, who else are you interfacing with? What is your world like?
Well, we really kind of interface with everyone. We have Nora, who's our music supervisor. She's sending us stuff and kind of gauging what, she's like, well, like, how are you guys liking this? And like, do you want more of this? So we kind of facilitate those types of discussions because we hear it from the brothers and we hear it from our editors and we're like, okay, we kind of have an idea of what the show is feeling like and what it wants to feel like. So we'll talk to Nora, she'll send us some stuff. We'll give it to Dave, who's our music editor, tell him what we're looking for. We want it to fade out here, that kind of thing. Visual effects, we were very much into the visual effects. We were in the sessions kind of, running the Avid and kind of talking with the guys, telling the visual effects team what the guys were looking for if the guys were out of town. So yeah, we kind of, we worked a lot with everyone and it's part of the job and I think we both really loved being that much involved. It was really kind of, and these guys were great. They gave us, they gave us a lot to do and threw us a couple bones for cutting some scenes and stuff, so it's great.
And you
Well,
both,
like I
you
said,
both
it's-
nailed those. by the way.
It's a collaborative effort, right? And he brings up a really good point, which is a lot of the questions that I always get asked, people that are coming up, and is how do I get into your chair? How do I get into that? And my answer every single time is hard work. Hard work will get you into the chair, and being with someone that is, coming from. I have a long history of editing. My father's been an editor for almost 45 years now, probably more than that now. and so for me, it was kind of a natural thing. And so when I became my father's assistant, after having to do a lot of grunt work,
Probably more than
probably more
yeah.
than most, exactly. For me, once I actually became an assistant, back in film, it was much easier to learn how to edit and actually be in that chair. Nowadays with digital, you're behind some screens and you're hitting keyboards and moving your mouse around. It's hard to teach the new generation how to edit. So I strongly believe in teaching as my father did as to me. So what I do is, I say, here, take this scene. It's a small little scene. Go cut it. I'll give you some notes. Once you've finished, I'll say, okay, well, why don't we try this or this or this? Let them go do that, and then I let them present their cut to the directors, because you have to have that feeling of, oh my God, I am going to be judged on my work. And that's really going to kind of separate the men from the boys and the women from the girls. It's going to be one of those things where you have to have that ability to, handle the pressure and the critique, and because they may go, it's horrible. I do not like anything you've done, and you've kind of, put your blood, sweat, and tears into this. And to have that, it's, and so you have to be able to take that and go, okay, well, how do I fix that? And how do I deal with that? And so I strongly believe, and that's how I would teach. And so I gave Nat a whole bunch of scenes to cut, give him notes, and he would present them to the duffers, and then they would give him notes, and he would do them. And that's how I kind of help Nat. And now, because I unfortunately am not be able to do season 2. Thank gosh, there's a second season. It's fantastic. But Nat, the Duffer Brothers really liked Nat, and as me, they are, hungry for young talent and fresh talent and just hard workers. And they allowed Nat to be the lead editor on season 2, or not lead editor.
Yeah, we
But
all right,
the
all right.
Additional editor
Just keep it cool.
on season 2.
Congratulations,
You're
Matt.
baiting me.
Yes.
I had to do it.
Well,
so.
let's diffuse the situation with a question on film and about generations and about the transition from different generations of editors to others. Obviously, you guys you're familiar with film, and now I'm assuming, Kat and Nat, you guys have never worked on a film-based project, or have you?
I haven't.
No.
Not really. I mean, I shot some stuff on Super 8, but
So that's
in-camera
kinda cool.
editing, like doing that, but that's about it.
That's a good way to learn. But it begs the question: is there something, and this comes up a lot, and maybe it's just because we're older and that's how we grew up with it. But is there something that today's editors or filmmakers are lacking because they haven't had that experience with a more mechanical, more laborious, maybe, process?
Well, I did come up through film when I started, and I stood behind my editor, and I would hand him pieces of 35 millimeter. That's how assistants learned back in the day when they cut on a Moviola or a Kim, a flatbed. They would have trims ready to go in a bin, and you would have to guess what the editor was going to ask for next. Was he going to ask for that medium shot or that close-up? And you'd plan it out. And there was something great about the tactile film, the feeling of film. And so I always felt that gave me an advantage, especially when I transitioned later to nonlinear. My break was that I was an assistant who happened to learn a nonlinear system that had a film background, so I could talk to editors in a film basis. What I found that's lacking now is that the assistants don't get a chance often, except we give our assistants chances. We feel like they should be able to cut scenes. In film, you would be thrown a scene to cut on your flatbed. But I think the speed has gone so quickly now with nonlinear that the expectations are you're going to turn stuff around and you don't get a chance to think about it. When it was on film, you had to watch that film go by. And if you wanted to get to the end of a take, you fast forwarded, but you were still watching it go by on your machine. So that you miss out, I think, on a lot of the little nuances sometimes if you're not paying special attention to your material. So you have to do an extra effort to watch all your coverage and make sure you have all of it in your mind before you start cutting. That's what I find, at least.
We did touch on visual effects a little bit, but Joe is asking a question about the Upside Down. For people that are familiar with the show, the Upside Down has a little bit of a different look and feel to it for both people in the show and people watching it. Was there any different approach involved with that than just traditional, the rest, the real world, I guess?
I mean, that was our episode. The Upside Down was just the culmination of everything. And so the Upside Down was we spent a lot more time in the Nether. So it was, it wasn't anything different style-wise or editing-wise. The visual effects were, adding the particulates and making the environments feel netherized and that kind of thing. So as far as we were concerned, it was just another episode that we were, trying to wrap up the entire story and finish this incredible arc that we had created. And that's what we did. So in terms of visual effects, there were a lot more visual effects in the last episode. Probably more than any of the other episodes that we had. And that was the other thing. Nat and Kat both were the quote-unquote VFX editors as well. They did everything. I mean, without these guys, we are not anything. So they can absolutely speak more to the visual effects side of things, but we did have a lot of visual effects in 8.
Yeah, 8. In the Upside Down, I mean, a lot of that was the brothers. The brothers had an idea and a vision of what they wanted for the Upside Down, and a lot of that was just VFX reviews. We would get a version, more spores was a lot of we wanted more spores. So that was kind of like a lot of, that was the note that we got quite a bit. And to create that kind of like that, it's the otherworldliness of it. It's, it's the Upside Down. So it's the same, but it's different. Same.
But it was also practically shot, the Upside Down. And then we did do set extension sort of things to make more of that growth on a tree out in the woods or whatever. Or the growths inside the lab type of stuff. Sound-wise is how we differentiated the Upside Down. It had a different sound quality to it. It was muted and didn't have a real-world atmosphere to it. The other one is the void, and that is the black area that Eleven goes into when she's in the tank, or whenever she goes the bathtub. When she goes into that other world, that's not the Upside Down. It's something completely different. It had its own sound, and we relied on our sound editors and sound supervisor to make.
There was a question which I lost already because these things come flying at me. I do what I can, but it was really regarding style of cutting between maybe the kids or the adults, or did your pacing or your style or aesthetic change, whether it was a certain character? Did a character, whether it's Hopper or Joyce, did they have a motif to them, or just a way you approach them, or was it really just, this is the project, this is the episode, this is the show, and I'm cutting it how I cut it?
No, I mean, thoughts went into how you do certain things. For me, with the kids, it was really, let's keep whatever they're doing fun and interesting, and it was always going to be fast-paced. I kind of treat how I cut things, how I read the scripts. If I'm engaged and I'm reading it super fast, that's how I cut it. If it's a scene, if it's a comedy scene, I'm always kind of flashing to what person can I go to, what reaction can I go to get that big laugh or get that comedic moment. And there's a comedy timing to everything. And sometimes, with kids, it's you create that in the room instead of that being an organic thing on set with like some, bigger, actors that have done comedy their whole life. And so that's, I think, a lot of what I brought to the table as far as I've done a lot of comedy features. And so for me, being able to cut scenes with a comedic thing, and it just it lightens scenes up so you have those kind of lighter, funnier moments to then enhance the scary, dark stuff.
So now you and Kat talked about the favorite bin being is like a portal for you to communicate. But in terms of being aware of what the other team was doing episode to episode, Were you interacting at all were you looking at each other's cuts? Were you having discussions about challenges you were facing? No, just totally
No,
not.
and,
really.
and that was the remarkable thing about how the project, how the series came together, was you have two totally different editors with, totally different styles of cutting, but it worked, and I think it's a tribute to the Duffers writing, their directing. Sean Levy also directed a couple episodes, and I kind of had a leg up on that because I do a lot of Sean's movies, so I have a shorthand with him, so I really know what he wanted and what he, and so only on those episodes Kevin would ask a couple times like, "Hey, do you think Sean will like this?" And I'm like, "Well, let's try it like this," or "No, he's gonna love that. That's like send it. That's amazing." But what I will say is, with all three directors of the series, the two Duffer brothers and Sean, we were never ever handcuffed. Meaning we were allowed to play in our sandbox, get as dirty as we wanted. We never had someone going, "No, you're going to make a mess." They literally let us do exactly what we were paid to do, exactly what they hired us to do. And it's a real, to have that kind of freedom and to be able to be as creative as you want and do things that are outside the box and out of the norm was so much fun. And that fun just translated to our office and how we interacted, and it was an incredible experience. It really, really was.
Yeah, and as far as looking at each other's cuts, I mean, I have to say, like, Dean would cut a scene and you'd hear the Duffers go, "Oh, we love that scene." You're like, "Oh, let me see." And then you would watch the little sequence. Or, and I happened to cut one that was cool, and they
Absolutely.
would come and check it out. But we never watched the full episode. I don't think it was till like episode 5 was being worked on that I was like, Kat's like, "Do you want to watch one, Kevin?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I better go watch it." You know what I mean? Because I've read the scripts, I know what the storyline is, and there hasn't been anything divergent between what his style versus mine. It's not the style so much. It's just we both approached the material the same way, and we ended up with the similar result. The kids more fast-paced with their cutting, and it wasn't because of their ability to act, because they were great actors. Those kids they're the best kid actors I've ever had the pleasure of editing, and but it's just funny that we were so in sync without having to look.
Yeah, and like I said, I really attribute that to the material we were getting, and but I think me and Kevin are similar in the sense that, like I said, we do approach editing the same way. Our philosophies are the same, so I think that's what really was unique about our pairing, and maybe that was what the Duffers saw as well when in hiring us and in meeting us. They kind of felt that synergy between
It
us.
would all work out.
Yeah, well, it certainly did. A lot of questions about season 2. So I'll tell you right now, there's a lot of great questions, but short of acknowledging there is going to be a season 2, which is great. That's really all we can address. So
That's all we know at the moment.
So thank you for sending those questions in. But that's
And I can honestly say I haven't read anything, don't know anything about it yet. So
probably the best way to
that
approach
is-
it.
And I'm not doing it, so
Yeah,
I can't.
So you can just kick
I'm
back.
out of the loop. Like once you're not a part of it, you're out.
You're frozen out.
Yeah.
You'd be like the rest of us.
It's locked down.
A few questions. One from Sarah on, what were your greatest struggles creatively and visually for season 1? And then Oscar, what was your favorite scene to cut or most difficult scene? Maybe there's some crossover there between those questions. So let's start with maybe favorite scene that you worked on.
so many.
Yeah, that's definitely a hard question. At least for me, my favorite scene, I think it's going to sound boring, but it was probably the most challenging, which is why I think it was my favorite scene. It was episode 1. It was this big dinner table scene that when you read it in the script, it was, just a conversation. It was, the Will had been taken. The boys wanted to find him. There was a curfew set down by the sheriff. No one could go out. You have the teenage love story with Nancy wanting to go see Steve, and her trying to figure out a way to sneak out of the house, and then protective parents, right, with this whole thing that's happening. And so it kind of just read as this normal dinner table scene. But what we had was this beautiful 2-year-old baby sitting in a high chair, eating her dinner, and I was like, okay, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to just cut to this child every time these guys are going crazy and have her shoot them looks like, what are you guys talking about? And it became this incredible challenge to get that, because they really only did limited coverage on her. There's time you can't shoot everyone, and with a 2-year-old, so they shot one take of her. So I did a lot of split screens and a lot of reversing and stuff. Just pulled all the tricks out of the hat to get this scene to work as this comedic moment. And it was one of those scenes where once we cut it and I sent it to the Duffers, they flipped out, and they had no expectation it was going to become a comedy scene. And it became then like this incredible moment where we didn't touch a single frame of that scene from the time that I finished cutting it to people seeing it on TV. So that was probably, as far as difficulty, and my favorite thing is making something out of what could have been just a mundane scene, an important scene for the series, but I just took it to the next level, and that was for me the pinnacle, I think.
I had too many favorites. I can't really just list them all. But as far as difficulty, I would say that when oh my God, I forgot what's the baby's name.
Holly.
Holly, thank you. When
That's
Holly,
what assistants are for.
Thank you.
With the baby's
When
gone.
Holly gets up from the table and wanders down the hall and follows the Christmas lights like this, and goes into the room and sees the monster against the wall. Well, that was the most difficult, in that we kept going back and forth on how much hand coming out of the wall are we going to see? How much monster are we going to reveal at that moment? And then will people question, why didn't Joyce see it when she comes in and grabs Holly? Was it just imagination, or did Holly see that, and why didn't Joyce see it? And so it was trying to find that right balance. And that cut went back and forth for a long time. I'm very happy with the result we have, but that was one where it was just, we couldn't decide exactly how to make that work as we were going along for a while.
I'm just going to point out, as you were speaking, I was watching the orange light above the K, and it started to flicker.
Oh no.
I'm just saying.
It is freaking me out too.
It freaked me out a little bit.
It's like Will Byers has a question.
Yeah. I'm glad I'm sitting on this side.
Oh boy, so much here. There's some questions on the finishing process. I guess people are curious about, and we talked a little about the dailies process and how you guys receive media, and it's already sunk up and it's DNX media. What's the finishing process like? And maybe let's also roll that into audio as well. I know that's a big question.
Well, we finished everything at the end. So that was, again, part of this whole, we kind of integrated a feature workflow with a TV series, which worked incredible because, like I said, we were able to go back, tweak episodes, and get them perfect, and then finish them, like technically. So we were at Technicolor in Los Angeles, and Skip Kimball was our colorist, who's done small movies like Titanic and Avatar and Terminator, just little
Stuff
low
that people have
budget
forgotten about.
stuff.
Yeah.
We got all the feature level,
Because of Sean Levy, who was our executive producer and director of 2 episodes, he brought with him his experience and knowledge and his clout to get these incredibly talented people to work on our film. So we did have Skip Kimball, our colorist, do it at the and so we did it all at the end. So for 28 days, I believe was our schedule. We mixed and did color timing, and they were right across from the hall from each other, so we could kind of bounce back and forth.
But the original materials were 6K that they shot, our dailies, and then they did a 4K extraction, right? And that was the framing that we got as DNX files. And then I wasn't even aware we could do this at the time, but Dean's like, okay, we got these 6K, so we have this border around the frame that we're going to be able to sneak in and use if we need to in repo. And so on cases where we didn't like the framing of the original shot, we could pull the 6K in, and then, was that it? That was a DNX file though, at the 6K.
We brought them in as QuickTimes.
As QuickTimes.
H.264.
Okay.
Just so we can bring them in.
Yeah, and so
we
then
needed.
we could mess around with the framing of those actual original shots and then get it ready to go for the online itself.
And then just tell the DI, hey, this one's a 6K, pull this one 6K. And it also gave you a little extra room if you wanted to like put a stabilize on there. It just had a little bit of extra space for.
Kind of the beauty of high resolution. You get a little room to.
Well, that's it.
You can push in
and
so
because we
much.
were 6K, the resolution was so great. You know, we could turn a wide shot like this and make close-ups of anyone we wanted. You know, and it was awesome because, again, it just was another tool in our bag, another toy in the sandbox that we got to play with.
You, Dean, had mentioned something about, we were talking about the scene with Holly, now that we know her name.
I can't believe I forgot it.
I know, it's
Holly Jolly.
and you're coming back.
My episode was Holly Jolly.
That,
I mean,
season 2 is all about Holly. That's it. Sorry. Dean, you had mentioned the bag of tricks. And I think that's something a lot of people watching might have keyed in on. Because I know I always do when an editor talks, so I went to my bag of tricks of like
Absolutely.
sheets. And do you guys, could you sort of walk through, like, as an editor, I find that I'm going to, because of performance or other challenges I might be faced with in cutting, there's certain tricks, for lack of a better term, that I use to get around that?
Absolutely. For me, you know, I do a lot of, not a lot, but I you know, if I find myself in a bind, I do split screen. So like in a scene like this, if, you know, Kevin's picking his nose and I'm talking, I can split screen that and, you know, not have him do that in the frame. So it's just, you know, stuff like that. So it's like split screens, or sometimes I'll find, you know, pieces, you know, when they're resetting and, you know, the prop guy comes in to reset something over here, but the camera's on the actor and the actor does something great. I can steal that piece, get that person out, or I'll reverse a shot, you know, which is what I did a lot with Holly to get that reaction. You know, I would, you know, play something and go, oh, if I reversed that action and had her look the other way instead of looking straight ahead and looking to the left, I could have her go from looking left to the, you know, straight ahead. That would make this great moment here. So it's like, you know, little things like that. And, you know, I just think every editor has their little things that they do. You know, you can speed up performances or slow them down if you need them to, for continuity and stuff like that. Like, you know, one of the things that I like to do is make sure that if someone's looking this way, when you cut around to them, they're not looking in a different direction. And so we have now the ability to do that kind of stuff by splitting frames and slowing things down or speeding things up or whatever we need to do.
my bag of tricks I really rely on the Avid is the Animat. I use that all the time.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it is because if you're on an over the shoulder of someone and the actor who's not really on camera moves their head or starts to speak and you don't want that to distract your cut, I will animate them and slow them down or freeze frame them. A lot of times I'll do like a 5-frame freeze of them at the end and no one notices that because you're distracted by the person who's doing the talking. And thank God for Animat because that saves me more than you know. And then because now we're on the high res stuff, just resizing, because you can blow up so much. When you were on film, 20% and you started getting grain. Now with 6K, you don't have to worry. You can blow up 80, 90% and never even know what's going on. As far as my pet peeve, and Kat knows this, that is my advice to anyone who's editing, is that I can't stand it when you cut on a blink. It drives me insane, and I think it just ruins the edit and it distracts. And so I will shift my cut like 1 frame earlier or after just to get the eye back open. And I've seen big movies where I'm like, I'll sit in my seat and go, my God, just why didn't you take that frame out? You don't do that. So if I do it, it's like 1 every 1,000 edits. That's my thing to don't do.
Well, I hear that about Animat a lot. So you folks watching at home, that's the secret weapon of Media Composer. Check out Animat if you're not using that yet. It is almost magic. Clock is winding down, so I want to make sure we try and get as many other good ones in there as possible. Okay, so Kevin, you talked about, I see these big budget movies and they make a cut that I can't stand. Are there editors that have influenced all 4 of you? I'm disqualifying Kevin and Dean for you two. But are there editors who influenced you? And Dean, maybe we have to remove your father from this because that's a little.
Well, I mean, the problem is I can't really remove my father because I was his assistant for 16 years. So
Well, you gotta owe him then.
I do owe him, and I do owe everything, to him. He taught me everything I know, and gave me an incredible career in life, and was so instrumental and such a supporter of mine. So for me, I'll do to Don.
And there's things that I love when I watch being edited, but I don't particularly say, oh my God, that style of that editor is something that I relate to, because as an editor, I've also cut in many different styles. And so I think it's just you take the material and you do the best you can. And if I'm not distracted by the editing, then I know that editor's done a great job. As far as me, my mentors are the editors I've assisted for coming up the line. And all of them were great editors that were open to me trying things and letting me cut scenes and giving me feedback and trying to help me. The first break I had cutting a television show was because an editor I had assisted before, and I had left to try to cut, low budget features. He said, Kevin, I've got this pilot. If you come and do it, when it goes to series, I'll make sure they make you an editor. And I was like, okay, I'll assist you on this. This will be awesome. And sure enough, it got picked up, and that was my calling card into into editing. But I just respect all of them, and I try to do that. I want my assistants to when they leave to say, Kevin tried to help me become an editor myself. And that's my stuff.
So some questions about who chooses what the project gets edited on. So when you go on a project, is it, hey, Kevin, Dean, this is an Avid show, or Kevin, Dean, I want you to be my editor, and you decide what the post-process is going to be?
For me, most features are cut on Avid nowadays, so it seems that it's the universal go-to for a lot of editors. I'm open to cutting on different things as long as they work. I don't want to get into a situation where I can't be the editor I need to be and as fast as I need to be because I'm dealing with software issues, or like I need something that's tried and true and stable and that works, and that and for me that's Avid. Like I cut everything that I do on it.
So it's left up to you to.
Yeah, I mean, as far as features go, it depends on projects and stuff like that. Like my first assistant that was with me for a long time went and did Deadpool, and that was cut on Adobe, and I know it turned out great and all that stuff, but he did have his trials and tribulations. That movie, I don't know if I could have done it because I couldn't be as fast, and I don't think I could have done the job I would have done on Avid on Premiere, because I just wasn't used to it. Now, that's not to say if I learned it backwards and forwards and inside out like I know Avid, then I couldn't do the same. But that particular time, just like getting thrown into it, I don't know if I could have done the job I needed to do.
And generally the economics of our business now is that they want it as quickly as possible, and you don't want to have headaches of trying something new at that time. I mean, if it's an independent project, maybe you could try it on something else. But I mean, pretty much most studios and networks are set with their Avid as their, the vendors all have Avids, and it's just the ease of what everyone knows. I mean, I actually turned down a show that was cut on another competing thing, and that network tried for that studio tried for a few years to try to bring in another system, and it didn't take. So now they're back to Avid. So it's what I know, and it's what I feel most comfortable with.
I think one of my favorite questions that's came from another Matt. What's your favorite part about being an editor or an assistant editor?
I think it's for me, it's being as creative as we can. It's dealing with everything. I describe what I do as being the hub of a wagon wheel. All the spokes lead to us, and we are what makes the wheel turn. And so for me, it's being able to deliver the final product, do the final rewrite, and tell the story. For me, the most important thing is making sure that the story works, that it's relatable and funny and real, and or broad if it needs to be, or whatever, but and also getting the director's vision out there.
And I would say for me, it's when you cut something and you've created something out of material that may not have been the best to start with, your starting point, and you still get the emotion that you were going for. And that feeling like, oh, that still gets me here, and I cut that. And sometimes like years later, I'll forget and I'll go, how did I cut that up? How did I cut that scene? It still gets me in a raw moment, but I don't even remember what the process was that I went through to make that edit work. And that's what I look for.
For Cat and Nat, I love saying that.
We did too.
Yes, it never gets old. Often the assistant editor is relied upon to really be at the forefront of new features, the technology. You're sort of the editor's one-man band for support a lot of times. How do you stay current with all that stuff? And how did you learn the technology to begin with, being an editor?
I learned just by working on Avid. You come into problems and you have to figure it out, and that's how you become kind of a master at, oh, I know why that happened. Oh, I know this happened to me before. Other than that, I mean, you have to keep up to date. You have to, watch the blogs and.
Yeah, keep watching the blogs.
No, for real, the tutorials, the readmes with the new versions that come out. Every time I learn a new feature, I run into his room. I'm like, oh my God, have you seen how you can grab this clip and move it on your timeline?
He just told me about another one in
it's just
A6 that's coming out. I'm like, I can't wait for that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's genuine. I get excited when there's new stuff that comes out. It's kind of, I like the technology. It's, speaking to what these guys answered about loving what we do is I love the whole creative aspect of the storytelling, but I also really like technology and, new computers and new, software and stuff. So just liking that stuff and doing the readmes, oh my God, Audio Suite we can nest them now. It's like,
yeah, that's a good one. I like that one. Well, I mean, clearly you guys have really taken technology and creativity and put it together in a way that has resonated with people all over the world. This is an awesome show. You don't need me to say that, but I'm going to say it anyway. I can't thank you enough for being here today with us, for making this incredible show. We all can't wait until the next one. And thank you, Joyce, for letting us use your house for this. And thank you all for joining in and watching us. This will be made available on demand. And if you want to hear more about when this is going to be available or any additional ones we're going to do, just follow Avid on the social channels and we'll let you know all about it. Until next time, thanks for joining us. We'll see you around.